Hello, kia ora. It's Thursday, the 9th of July. Thank you for joining me as we take a look at the forecast for Matariki, the rest of the long weekend, and how next week is shaping up. So we kick off with the satellite imagery. At the moment, the heavy rain that has been around the South Island has moved up to northern parts of Hawke's Bay, and you see this cloud spilling over into Waikato, Bay of Plenty and Auckland, also bringing with it some showers and patchy rain. Bit of an unusual direction to be getting showers from a southeasterly like that, but sometimes you have enough energy to come over the hills and ranges. So heaviest falls, as I say, around northern parts of Hawke's Bay. Still some wet weather around Canterbury, patchy kind of rain and showers, breaking up a lot more, and the further south you go, the drier it is, and it's still dry and mostly sunny over along the west coast. Here's how it looks at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So cold weather across the South Island. The colder it gets, the drier it gets. So you've got drier skies in the south. Low temperatures though. Some places only going for a maximum of 5 or 6 degrees today. And overnight lows going into the weekend, -3s, -4s. So it's going to get quite cold in a number of places with widespread frosts. The wet weather still continues on around some parts of North Canterbury and going in towards the Marlborough region. But like I say, most of the wet weather is actually being pushed into northern Hawke's Bay and up towards Gisborne, Tairāwhiti areas. And because of the southeasterly flow, it's a little brisk in exposed areas, and we are still getting a few spillover showers that may still come in towards Waikato and Bay of Plenty. But as we go into the later part of today, any remaining showers in the north here, most of those should start to break apart. And driest weather, as I mentioned before, along the west coast and also large parts of Southland. Here is the situation this evening. So the low that brought all the heavy rain is out to the east. It's a double yoke now. We've got two areas of low pressure next to each other, spinning around, still covering a very large area. Now the wind is being caused not by the low itself, but by the gap, the squash zone, I should say, between high pressure and low pressure, this part in the middle here. So strong south to southeasterly winds continue, especially around the North Island. The South Island though, high pressure is building for you. The winds are easing back, still a bit brisk in some exposed areas like the Marlborough Sounds, maybe around Banks Peninsula, but most areas will notice the wind dropping back a bit if it's been windy where you are. And it's windy out around the Chatham Islands and cold with that southeasterly wind, also brisk between low pressure and high pressure. Matariki tomorrow morning, for those of you that are getting up early to check out the stars before the sun rises, it does look cloudy in a number of places, especially along the eastern side of New Zealand. That's where we're seeing most of the cloud. But the upper North Island, the upper South Island, the west coast, and some parts of Otago and Southland may have the clearer skies. But the best thing to do is go to ruralweather.co.nz. At Rural Weather, we've got a fog and cloud forecaster for every location in the country. Comes in a graph form, and you can kind of get an idea as to whether or not it's going to be cloudy, or you just wake up and look out the window and decide whether it's worth getting up out of bed or not. So that is the cloud cover for 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Frosty weather as well. Now, we do have clouds, so that's why some of the coastal areas may not have a frost around the South Island. The further inland you are, the higher the chance of a frost, and only a bit of a frost risk around the mountains of the Central Plateau, mostly because it is still cloudy with a bit of a breeze blowing through there. Here is the noon Friday forecast. Now this includes 24 hours of rainfall from today through to tomorrow. So some of the areas you see around Waikato and Bay of Plenty, those showers are falling at the time I'm recording this on Thursday morning and may not be there by the time we get to lunchtime tomorrow, which is the snapshot of the isobars. But you can see it's getting colder for the North Island as the polar boundary goes further northwards. There'll still be some snow flurries around Central Plateau, possibly even on some of the higher peaks of the ranges coming into the lower part of the North Island on the eastern side, and heavy rain. Still up to 100 millimetres of rain to come into northern parts of Hawke's Bay, maybe even more than that. So keep up to date with the Met Service. That rainfall tapers off the further north you go and the further west you go. So a number of areas are dry in the north. In the South Island and around central New Zealand, still some showers are forecast. So we've got the shower risk mostly from central parts of Canterbury northwards. The further south you are, the drier it is, but you've got a few coastal showers possible around parts of Southland and Otago and the Catlins, places like that. Driest weather, west coast and inland parts of the South Island, and actually western parts of the North Island are also mostly dry, except for around Taranaki, and maybe a couple of showers spilling over into Hotawhenua and parts of Manawatu. Frost risks for the weekend. So frosty for the South Island on Saturday. The frost risk also extends further up towards parts of Waikato as we go into Saturday. And on Sunday, pretty similar. But the frost risk for the North Island expands as the wind eases and the clouds start to disappear. And just take a look at our local forecast at Weather Watch or Rural Weather. Rural Weather's actually got a frost forecaster for your location, and so you can check that out there as well. Noon Sunday. So we've got the polar boundary around the lower half of the North Island and the eastern side. Now, if you notice this blue circle up here, that's kind of like the leftover of the polar boundary, because overnight, Friday night, going into Saturday morning, it briefly comes up over the whole country and then it sort of fades away. It's like when a wave goes up a beach, then it retreats back to the sea and you still got the bubbles of water sort of going into the sand. That's a little bit like this with the cold air up in the atmosphere. So it'll be a cold morning on Saturday around the North Island, but coldest weather will be in the east and the south and right along most of the South Island. The west coast slightly on the edge of it. You'll still feel cold, but it'll be a beautiful day hopefully over there. And with high pressure now over the South Island, that's why you've got that frost risk increasing, and still a few showers, maybe from Wellington up towards about East Cape. That's the highest risk of showers really anywhere in the country. Let's go to Sunday now. The high pressure zone still over the South Island, extending out over the Chatham Islands. It's still cold. The placement of the high pressure zone encouraging this more southeasterly wind that comes into the North Island. It's not very strong, but it's enough to just keep those temperatures down in a number of places. So another cold start to the day, but it should be sunny in many more places than it has been. But this is building out over Australia, the next cold front, the next cold change. But ahead of it, the northwesterlies come in. So while Sunday morning will be a cold morning in many parts of New Zealand, the daytime temperatures aren't overly flash in many places as well. But by the time we get into Monday, the northwesterly winds are kicking in. So you'll probably get back into the double-digit daytime maximums, going into the teens in some areas. The North Island also getting warmer airflows coming through. It doesn't mean it'll feel warm, but it'll be warmer than it has been. The polar boundary, though, look at this. It's still in the northeast corner of the North Island, but extends right up, north of New Zealand out to our east, all due to this very strong high over the Chatham Islands that broke records in Australia for the highest air pressure ever recorded. It was into the 1040s. I can't remember the number, excuse me, but it was over Tasmania a couple of days ago. So that's moving out. Big high pressure zone pushing the southerly wind right up into the subtropics. But we're getting a subtropical nor'wester developing that will lift up the temperatures for the South Island. That's why the polar boundary disappears away from the South Island. By Tuesday, you've got the cold front here out at sea. That's where the polar boundary returns again. We've got showers and fronts coming through the country going into Tuesday, and a windy nor'wester still around, but the temperatures may just start to dial back a little bit in some locations, but especially going into Wednesday, that's more likely to happen, because on Wednesday, that's the leftovers of the front, not too significant, so it's not a big rainmaker, but the colder weather comes in, and so you will get some showers, maybe a few snow flurries on the mountains and the ranges once again in the lower part of the South Island this time, but a colder airflow, not just for us, but into Sydney as well and large parts of New South Wales. So let's have a look at the rainfall now. Here is the expected rainfall. This is just for today, so just to give you an idea of where it's going, then I'll show you the 7 days. So we've got heavier rain over here around Hawke's Bay, some locations, as I mentioned, getting up to 80 or over 100 millimetres or more. The good news is inland from Kaikoura and further down into Canterbury, those rainfall totals taper right off. So here is the date. I'll now animate it. You can see as we go through the next few days ahead. So not necessarily massive amounts of wet weather coming on through, but when that front comes in next week, that'll bring heavy rain into Westland and Fiordland, and just a few showers for other places. So it's not looking overly wet, but we just got to get through this heavy rain for today, Friday. Big thank you to NEDAP for supporting us. Please support them if you're in the position to. Thank you very much for joining me this week. Have a great long weekend, and I'll catch you again on Monday next week.